Human Gambit series. Book 1, Chapter 5, Scrappy One. Max and Tom had christened the resulting Franken-Ship Scrappy One. It should be capable of FTL travel, but Max wouldn't dare try. If pushed to its maximum, the ship likely wouldn't last long. The support systems for actual faster-than-light travel hadn't been created yet. There were no magical shields like in the movies for Scrappy One and Max. And even if such shields were possible, it would have taken years, if not decades, to design and perfect them. So, without any type of shielding and the ship effectively going thousands of kilometers per hour, hitting something as small as a grain of sand would be disastrous. For this ship, on this trip, there was a sweet spot: travel too slowly, and Max could run out of air or starve to death before he even arrived at his destination. Travel too fast, and he could be killed by that grain of sand. Luckily, power was not an issue. The ship and its related probes received their energy via nuclear-powered plasma electron pumps, coupled with superconductive capacitors, essentially generators without any moving parts. Something akin to an atomic battery, but with a longer life and a much higher energy density. For their plan to work, Max must intercept the comet while it's still in the outer solar system. He has no tool or weapon other than the ship itself, so the only real option is to try to nudge the comet off course. If all else fails, Max is to try to destroy the comet via collision. Throughout the journey, the ship's velocity, in reference to standard spacetime, would be meticulously maintained at a lower threshold. This careful management ensures that the gravitational gradient it generates can effectively redirect smaller objects out of its flight path. The best the team could manage was to form the gravitational gradient into a blunt, cone-like shape that would act as a kind of windshield. This fixed field matrix would not allow the ship to turn on a dime, or even turn at all, but it was hoped that it would give Max and Scrappy One a modicum of protection from smaller stellar and cosmic debris. The maneuvering and drive coils were, for lack of a better word, leaky. Tom's team couldn't design and manufacture the needed waveguides in the time allotted, so they improvised. The emitters weren't adequately calibrated or shielded, and the drive systems could quickly overheat if they came into contact with external fields. Additionally, there was no time to thoroughly test for and correct any imbalances in the FTL configuration or create sensor software suites for auto-corrections during active travel. Scraptech had already built the prototype hull, and the team did the best they could to integrate Max's technology. However, sensors and antennas couldn't be retrofitted onto the ship's external structure. It would have been impossible in the short time before departure. When active, the fields generated by the vessel effectively block all communications. The skin of the ship needed to be as smooth as possible, because the faster-than-light drives and maneuvering fields could create dangerous eddy currents and high-voltage discharges upon the outer hull. As such, Scraptech needed to electromagnetically isolate the interior of the ship from the exterior, so the harmful byproducts of the fields could not find their way back into Scrappy One. To allow for communications when not in FTL, one small seam in the skin of the hull was transformed into a transceiver array that would be physically disengaged via a relay when the FTL or maneuvering fields were active. To overcome the ship's navigational and communication shortcomings, the team created pilot probes, sensor and communication suites mounted in torpedo-looking objects with their own maneuvering fields and FTL drives. These probes could hop ahead of Max's ship and scan for issues. Since the pilot probes were much smaller than Scrappy One, their hulls could incorporate the needed equipment. Just like with Scrappy One, the fields generated by the probes did not allow for maneuvering while active and effectively blocked all communications. So, neither communications from Earth nor telemetry readings from the probes were available while the maneuvering fields or faster-than-light drives were active. However, when communications could be received, the system would self-correct. The more feedback the primary navigation system received from the pilot probes, the more accurate its calculations and simulations would become. With all this in mind, Max and the team opted for a modified FTL start-stop approach they called hopping or jumping. The process was this. The pilot probes would move a specified distance ahead of Scrappy One at a fixed velocity, stop, scan the surrounding space, and relay any data back to the ship. Scrappy One would then update its software and simulations before disseminating updates to the probes. The WildStar array would also receive burst echoes and telemetry data from the probes so Earth could track both them and Scrappy One, as well as provide support via updated telemetry if needed. Positioning fields would then point the ship and probes in the new direction. Finally, if all was safe, the ship would jump to meet the probes. The process would be repeated until the destination, i.e., the comet, was reached. Because of Scrappy One's small size, only one person could fit inside the hull. There was also room for just enough air, food, and water for one. Due to the janky nature of the ship's systems, sending someone who knew them intimately made the most sense. The best person to pilot the vessel was the person who could also fix it if something went wrong mid-journey. One ship, one chance, which meant the pilot needed to be Max. After all, he had been tinkering with these types of systems for years, so somewhere deep in his brain, neural networks had grown that seemed to simulate and intuitively understand them. There are no maths in place yet to use, no logic flowcharts, only Max's hard-won knowledge and intuition. Plus, Max had no problem being on his own, in confined spaces, for awfully long periods of time. After all, he had been a free-range kid with an absent father and an inattentive mother. He'd spent most of his life keeping himself company, so really, Max knew he was the right person for the job. But he could still have fun blaming it all on Tom.